Hello, my name is Dana Ruggiero, and I'm giving a talk on how game developers define success. I'm supposed to ask you to move in case people need more chairs. Okay. So just by a show of hands, how many people here are game developers? Woo! And how many people here are games researchers? Like you teach at a university as well? Yeah? Okay. A few. Anybody else I might have missed out on, students or things like that, yeah, game designers. So I'm a researcher. If you're not familiar with the English terminology, and yes, this is a Bath accent, then I'm a reader, which basically means I do research. And the research I conduct is on games and learning. One of my passions is ethnography, basically getting stories. And over the last 4 years, I've gotten the stories of game design from 55 game designers around the world, people whose names you'll probably recognize. So to start off with, when I started this project, my main idea was, what is a framework for game design? What kinds of stories can game designers, game developers tell about their process that can help me learn if there's a certain way to do this? Okay, is there a right way? Is there a wrong way? What makes success? Well, that bombed pretty quick. 55 game designers, 55 different frameworks, 55 different stories. Really zero consistency when it came to the actual stories. But we did have some consistencies when it came to definitions of success. So this talk is about the fact that game design itself still exists beyond this mystique of programming, art, and showmanship. Maybe not for you because you are game designers and you know it's a slog, but for people that aren't game designers, people like me, it's like you press a magic button and all of a sudden, boom, there's this amazing game. And I know that's not how it actually works. So when we look at game designers who have published at least one game, we can see that behind this mystique is hard work, late nights, and the lure of lasting success. This talk will look at how 55 game designers from indie to AAA think about success in relation to their own journeys as game designers. So this is the first question. How do game designers define success? And then how do I actually answer that question? Believe it or not, you can't just call somebody up and say, hey, how do you define success? It stifles the conversation right away. Now, as a researcher, as somebody that works in a university as a professor, I can tell you right now, success for a professor is publications and research grants. That's it. Okay, that's pretty much it. But it seems to be very, very different for game designers. So asking questions is basically what I do for a living. And as a researcher, I'm interested in the lived experiences of a specific phenomenon. And right now I'm very interested in games. I have been for the past 10 years. So here's the answer. 4 years of interviews, research and writing. 4 years, all right? I spent a lot of time talking to game designers, mainly over Skype, sometimes in person. And in the end, I had over 100 hours of recorded interviews, and transcription was horrible. This is actually going to be a book from Focal Press called Why We Design Games. It's coming out in December. So the next question I had was, what is the best way to actually tell this story? Now, points if you recognize this guy without looking at the name. Okay? So Studs Terkel is an amazing, amazing writer, and I kind of want to be him when I grow up. Not like him, but his writing style, because he's goofy. He wrote Working. Has anybody here read Working? Yes, amazing book. So what he did is he went around the country for years and years, and he got the working lives of everybody, from CEOs to waitresses to truck drivers to bank accountants, everybody. And he had them tell it in their own personal way. And the book, you would think you were that truck driver, or you were that CEO, or you were that ballet dancer if you read it. So I'm not Studs Terkel, and my writing style is not half as eloquent or well done, but I'm trying. And this work, this is my best effort so far. Okay, so these are the people I interviewed. Okay, the interviews ran the gamut from people who had dropped out of college to make games, people in PhD programs, veterans of the field, newbies, indie game developers, and AAA. All very, very busy people who are willing to talk to me. If you're in this room, thank you. Okay, thank you very much for talking to me. And this is what I found. So there were 19 people who identified as women, The average was about 13 years of experience. And the reason it's an average is because I asked from the time they had begun developing games. So not the time they had published their first game, but the time they'd begun developing games. And some people that had been when they were 13 years old. It was a snowball sampling. So the last question I asked in this interview was, is there anybody else out there whose game design process I should talk to? Who do you recommend? So I got more people by asking them who they thought had a cool game design process. They had to have at least one published game. I had to be able to find it on the internet. My publisher insists. They had to be willing to talk to me. That was actually quite a big one. Not a lot of people were willing to talk to me. There were 5 questions. First question was, take me through the best game you ever played. The best game design that you thought you ever played. Second question is, when did you move from playing games to designing games? Third question was, tell me about your game design process from start to finish. So choose a game and bring me through it. Fourth question was, how do you define success as a game designer, game developer? And fifth question was, who else do you recommend I speak to? The interviews lasted an average of 45 minutes. Some people spoke really fast, 10 minutes. Some people, Brenda Romero, I was on the phone with for 2 hours. So, it just depends on the kind of story you were going to tell. So there were themes. There's about 5 themes. I'm going to go through them now. Okay. The first theme was this idea of a one-woman band, working alone and creating communities. So here are some examples of that. Okay? Progress. In my one-woman band, progress is one way of making the band. This idea that you put little pieces together every single day, and this is a definition of success. Every single day, you move your project forward. And that you looked at your progress and said that same day, okay, this is good, now I can move on to the next step. Another one was creative freedom. I don't know if a Cheerio Lamb is here at GDC, but thank you for Drunken Robot Pornography. Amazing game, okay? And this idea of creative freedom, that basically you have the ability to play a 20-minute riff in your band, and you can call it a rude name, and nobody's gonna come back at you because you are the band. You are this one-woman show. And that's another way to think of success. Thirdly, in the one-woman band was this idea of building a following. Henry Smith's Space Team basically said that it's not about making money so much as it is about saying in the future, hey, I made that cool game, this is why you should buy this next cool game that I made. So building a following, the ability to create for yourself, but also able to say, I made this. So back me because I made this other cool thing. Okay. Finally, agency. This idea that you want to promote agency and the joy of seeking your own process. You don't really care about other people defining your success. You know you're a game designer, you know you're a game developer, and that's it. That's good enough. This idea that you can just say, screw this, and I'm going to make my own types of games. Elizabeth Lepensee was actually very, very eloquent when she said that when you're starting from a place of seeking validation from other people, then that's not a creative process. The second theme that came up a lot was moving goalposts. This idea of struggling with defining success and actually recognizing it when you see it. I actually suffer from this myself. I think there's even a name for it called imposter syndrome. Okay. So one of the first sub-themes in this was this idea that success is a sliding scale. Success can go back and forth. That you really have to think about confining success. Calling yourself successful across the board was almost like tempting fate too much. That saying, this project, this game, this little part is successful. And that can get bigger or smaller depending on the games you're making. Approval. Okay? Approval. Nina Freeman said this very, very well as well, that I still haven't gotten my own mom to play one of my games. When I do, I feel like that will be the end-all of success. That by having the people that you love and the people that have raised you to actually validate what you're doing is a form of success. Andrea Phillips, who made Perplexity, talks a lot about this idea of scalability, that small scale can still be successful. In fact, it's just as valid as large scale. That you need to find your bubble and go with it, because it has to be about you and not about a number. Do 50 people play your game? Do 50,000 people play your game? Are you employed for 6 months at EA? Are you employed for 20 years somewhere else? What is your bubble? Look for it, find it, be okay with it. This idea that you have to just be okay. You have to be okay with not being successful. Avery Alder McDonald doesn't actually make games anymore. She tells me that she stopped making games because of, well, lots of reasons, but this battle with success was one of them. She was probably one of the most elegant people that I actually interviewed. This idea that she doesn't have a good rubric for evaluating success. And that was seen in a lot of the interviews, hemming and hawing, me saying, what makes you successful as a game designer, and people not being able to answer the question, or being able to answer it but taking 20 minutes. Being okay with not being successful is really hard to do. Some designers talked about the idea that success can go both ways, and that being okay with that is a challenge and a good way to think of goalposts. So the fact that you're not successful and being okay with that is a way of being successful. It's very meta, but it's a big circle. The third theme was horizon scanning. This idea that as a game designer, you always want to provide new interactions, new technologies, new ways of working. So one of those things was accountability. That as the game designer, you have to be accountable to your players. That players liking your game was a sign of success, and that you want to bring new things and be interesting and have interesting things for your players, but that you should be aware that they're going to hold you accountable. Kyle Gabler, who's part of 2D Boy, said this very, very well, that otherwise we're just wasting everybody else's time. Transforming play. Beyond the actual game, not just saying within the game, but beyond the actual game, it was also mentioned quite a lot. Bringing in the unexpected, bringing the joy, creating new play experience, and then challenging yourself to say, okay, we've done that, now let's go beyond that. If, like Robin here says, after they're done, they can say, wow, that was unexpected. I didn't think I would enjoy that, but now I see the world differently as a result of it, then you are a successful game designer. It's the ultimate success. Enhancing design vocabulary. It's one thing to make a game, it's something else to make something that somebody else can then take and make another game, or to make something else, pushing it forward, okay? It's one thing to be an expert, but then it's another thing to be able to take that expertise and teach somebody else how to do it. John Romero actually says this very, very well, that game design has been around a long time, and that Angry Birds could have been made, with the 8-bit computers of the 80s, but it wasn't, because our design vocabulary wasn't established. So this idea of weaving threads of success, that you being successful on your own as a game designer is one pinpoint, but then being able to push that forward, being able to say, okay, other people can now use this technology, can now use this interaction, can now use this design vocabulary, and make it more, make it better, not proprietary. Satisfaction. Ed Key, who wrote Proteus and who likes to take long hikes, talked to me a lot about motivation, this idea that he wants to create neat things, but that there still has to be player satisfaction within that, that you can push past boundaries. I mean, you can make something that, that you control with a churro, and then you eat the churro, but nobody else can actually make that, and maybe it's not satisfying as a game design experience. He was a lot more elegant than I am in this. But that you have to retain good play. That good play is one of the key marks of being a good game designer, and it has to be engaging for people. This is the one I actually expected to come up first and didn't. Okay? That we do this for money. Out of the 55 game designers I spoke to, nobody came out and said, I do this for money. I was surprised, but then I thought, I am recording you for a book, so maybe you don't want to say, I go to work for a paycheck, okay? But this theme was probably one of the most powerful, and one sub-question I asked a lot of the indie game designers was, if you worked for a AAA, would your game design process change? And a lot of them said no, that they would rather stack boxes than change their game design process for money. So this idea is we gotta eat, paying the bills and responsibilities. So one aspect of success was funding. Warren Spector basically said that I measure success by this idea that, can my next game get funded? How many do I have to sell of this game to get the next game funded? Moving forward through funding was a practical yet tried way of thinking about financial success. Based solely on numbers, what does it take to be able to make another game? What is the magic number? Okay, I guess it depends on who you are as well as the game you make. Another one was about fearing the mundane. Davy Reedon said it best in the Stanley Parable that he actually fears normal jobs. That he has to be profitable, because if he's not profitable, then he has to go back to doing a normal job. Making money was a way to avoid the soul-destroying job, and money makes it possible to continue to be creative and design games rather than stacking boxes. Then we had some people that said, that's okay. I'd rather stack boxes than do this creativity burn that making money ensues. That let's be okay with the idea of stacking boxes, as the pressure to make money burns creative energy day after day, and that really being able to take your extra time and make something you're passionate about would be worth it if you just had a normal job. And this idea of responsibility. We're not all one-man bands or one-woman bands, all right? Some people, not a lot of people, have responsibilities. They have kids, they have grandparents, they have houses, they have mortgages, they have a lifestyle they want to maintain. You have responsibilities, and one of the responsibilities is you have to eat. And the responsibility first was a theme that really came across. I will say that theme came across more in the people that have been doing this longer than it did for the people that have been doing it a shorter amount of time. But this really brings to light this idea that every effort brings both artistic and commercial success, ideally, but sometimes you only get one, and one of them will pay bills and one of them won't. Okay. We also have this idea of creating a lasting legacy, of hitting it big, being remembered in games, being the person that made this thing that everybody can then say, I made this thing. Go get your picture with them at GDC. It's that person that made the thing. Okay? So this idea of looking beyond, constantly looking beyond, is exhausting. Okay, it's exhausting, yet this is where many game designers seem to find themselves. This drive to make something that would be remembered forever. And Jason Rohr actually said it very, very well, that it's like the old obscenity thing. You know it when you see it. You know something fantastic when you see it. And that something that will last, something that's just more, that's just not binary, something beyond that. And I couldn't get him to be any more specific than that, honestly. Ego, okay? Very, very, very much an ego-driven occupation from the 55 people I talked to. Maybe not all of you, but from the 55 people I talked to. It was very evident throughout the interviews, the idea of go big or go home. Make something that will stand the test of history. And Anna Tito, a developer from Australia, says it very, very well, that the games are an experience, and that she releases the whole experience and not just one song. That games have to be good over the years. Decades if you're lucky, but definitely good over the years. Years are the enemy of digital games. Mechanics and technology improve, and what was amazing 10 years ago may look antiquated a few years later. Joy, fun, and having a good time do not fade, and game designers see this as a lasting legacy, a way of thinking about success. David Jaffe actually said it very, very well, that game design success is that going back and being able to play these games years later and still having a good time. This idea that you should leave something behind, that when somebody plays your game, the part of the game should go with them. Game designers want to create a lasting experience for the player. Little pieces of the game that are left behind and bring it forward. Okay, that actually bring them forward. Larry Lynn McWilliams said to me that she thinks that games that are ranked the highest and should rank the highest are the ones that leave something behind when you're done with playing them. So here's some lessons learned from those 5 different themes. 1, nobody was one thing. There was an amazing amount of overlap. I thought I was going to have people fall into one theme or the other, but what it came down to is that many people fell across the different themes. Simply because, yes, they might do it for money, but they're also simply very passionate about their jobs. Yes, they might want to leave a lasting legacy, but also was about having creative freedom. Okay? This is probably the most frustrating. Experience does not equal clarity. The ability to talk about the game design process did not get clearer when interviewing people with the most experience. In fact, some people were so beyond knowledgeable that they couldn't define success anymore. The process of game design was so ingrained within them. Clarity about individual projects was actually more easy to recall. And have you seen this? It's something we tend to use when we're talking about expert analysis. And these people were basically in the 4th level. They were so competent, they couldn't actually tell me how they were competent anymore. The people that were newer at this, the people that had maybe been designing 10 years or so, they had conscious competence. They could bring me through their steps. They could define very, very easily what it meant to be successful. But the people that had been doing this a very, very long time, the lines had blurred. They simply couldn't lay it out in a straight line. Goal setting is continuous and ongoing. Throughout the interview, many game designers talked about evolving processes and evolving definitions of success. It's a success to just simply keep designing games, and it's a success to be able to keep trying. Finally, you don't have it figured out any more than I do. You don't. No game has the same journey, and no game designer has the same process for thinking about success. From the analogies they develop to the games they produce, game designers in this presentation have worked alone, dealt with moving goalposts, scanned the horizon of what could be next, paid the bills, and aimed for creating lasting legacies. The kinds of analogies they talked about were the first penguin, Sherry Rayner Gray being the first penguin, fields of virgin snow, the magic circle, walking alone, making the music, puzzles. Everybody had an analogy for what they were doing. This is in no way a comprehensive list of every success status that could exist, but by examining the design process of these designers, we have learned that this field is about the audaciousness of creation, the privilege of impact, and the sheer exhaustion and exhilaration that comes when they have put the game to bed. Thank you. Questions? And if I interviewed you and you're here, hi. Okay.
I have a question regarding, so you asked each of the individual game developers, but game development is very collaborative. I'm wondering if you detected a strain that tended toward collaboration or away from collaboration as far as measures of success.
Okay, good question. So were there strains of collaboration or were there not strains of collaboration in defining success?
Is there a hostility toward, because I noticed you said, people said they'd rather not change their process, they'd rather be packing boxes. Well, when you work with other people, it's really important to be flexible.
That is true. So of the 55 people that I interviewed, well, 56 people, one was a pair, Danielle Swank and Jim Fleming. They're a pair, and they work actually very, very well together in terms of their design process. Everybody else that I interviewed talked about themselves as a sole game designer. They didn't really get into the idea of collaboration, and when they did, so for instance, John Romero talked about an online game that he had created, and the idea there was that I needed them to talk about something where they had the decision-making process. So when they talked about collaboration, it was secondary to their definitions of success.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for the great talk. After you talking with these designer and famous game developers, what's your general feel about these people as a group? Do you think that generally they are good people, bad people, or do they just nasty people that are just egotistic or whatever? So if you just take them as a group, what would you characterize them?
Okay, so I'm being recorded as well. no one seemed like a bad person. You know, everybody was people that agreed to speak to me were people that were willing to have their ideas out there. And they also were willing for me to give this presentation, because I sent them an email saying I was giving this presentation. I would guess they're good people. I mean, I don't really know anything about their personal lives. What I did want to hear about was, I wanted to hear about people that had different game design processes. And some of the people that were recommended because they were difficult to work with, and I'm not going to say their names, were some of the people that definitely told the most interesting stories. But as for, do they kick puppies? I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the talk. It was really informative. Did you notice a difference between the independent developers and the AAA developers in their design process whenever they talked about it?
Yes. Oh, yeah, that's actually a very, very good question. Yes. Independent game designers, I'm sorry if this actually sounds bad, but it seemed like they hadn't lost their hope. I'm sorry if this sounds bad, but it seems like they still believe that the magic could happen, whereas the people that I talked to that work for AAA seemed more along the lines of that it was a business. That it was a business, and that it was a very big machine, and that yes, that they were a game developer or game designer, but as part of this idea of collaboration, they didn't maybe have as much agency as they could have. Agency came a lot from the independent game designers. And this study leans more towards independent game designers simply because they were the people willing to talk to me. The people in AAA, I got very, very nice letters back saying, no, because we're not sure what you're going to write. So I would say that, yeah, I hate to call it hope, but it's really what it seemed like. It seemed like anything's possible. If I just work hard enough, if I just do this thing, eventually I will be successful. And that was amazing to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Could you talk a little bit about the process of compiling this into a book and what the focus of the book is, what you hoped it would be, or how it changed in the process of making it?
Of course. So Sean Cameron from Focal Press, not Sean Cameron, wow, I'm gonna forget his name now. Anyway, Sean from Focal Press is my editor, and the book is called Why We Design Games, Frameworks from Indie to AAA. And each of these people have talked me through the game they are most proud of. So maybe not the game they're most famous for, but the game they are most proud of. And this idea of building on success came from them talking about, well, which game should I choose, Dana? Which game, the game that made me the most money, or the game where I thought the process was the best, or the game where, the most people responded in these different ways. And every time I took notes, it kept coming down to pride and success don't really equal the same thing. So the book will look at the individual process. So what you'll see is 55 different games torn apart, and then you'll see their lessons learned, as well as their pasts of the best game they ever played, or the first game they ever played, and how they became game designers.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, thanks again for giving this talk. So in all the times that I've spoken with game devs and project managers and everything, you seem to come across some common themes. Like I would say one of the ones I stumbled upon seemed to be like, nothing's like black and white. Like everyone's sort of, there's like this sort of, it sort of depends on the situation answer. So I was wondering, in the talks and the interviews that you had with people, if you seem to come across those like common core like answers or something like that.
I would say yes. I would say there were some common core answers. As much as people wanted to say that the money didn't matter, it had to matter. It has to matter in some aspects. So that, but how much it mattered was really dependent on the individual game designer. And in terms of the process of actually designing the game, that's what I was talking about in terms of unconscious competence and things like that. Mm-hmm. What I got a lot was, and then we designed the game. Like, well, what does that mean? Okay. I need you to bring me through it step by step. So yes, there were common core answers in things like user testing or how they design music or white boxing and things like that. In terms of how people think about success, these themes were actually very, very hard to draw together because what I'm making people seem like here is very black and white, when in reality, nobody was. It just happened to be which box they fit more into, less than they're solely about money or solely about creative freedom.
I really like that answer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, great talk.
Thank you.
Did any of the designers that you talked to, the developers, talk about failures? A lot of their failures? Were they comfortable talking about their failures? Did they not want to talk about their failures?
Yes, okay, so failures. Let's see, the first 17 people I talked to, we talked about failures, when you really, really just bombed and things went bad. What I found after that is that those people then took away permission for me to use their stuff in the book. So then I stopped asking about failures, not all of them, but about 7 out of the 17, whose names I cannot mention here because they took away their permission for me to actually use that. Some people were very, very open about it. It seemed like the more successful and well-known you were, the more okay you were with the idea that you had failures out there. And the less games you had out, or the less successes you had, the less okay you were with admitting the fact that, you know, that you've bombed.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Ben from Google. I had a question on your first question you asked them was what game like inspired them or they felt, was there common themes there for what inspired all of them or?
No. So there were no common themes for the first games they played or the first games they thought had a really big impact on them. And I think the reason behind that is because of just the age range of the people. So some people said it was tic-tac-toe, you know, some people said it was something on an Atari, some people said it was Mortal Kombat, you know, other people were talking about arcade games where they were playing, Space Invaders, I'm guessing, the things drop down, Space Invaders. So no, there was no actual common theme for the games that had the most impact on them. And I was actually kind of surprised. I thought they would be more in tune. You know, nobody said Mario, how's that? Nobody said Mario.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, why did you focus just on designers?
As opposed to?
Producers, programmers, artists.
Okay, that is my own ignorance, honestly. In not being a game designer or a game developer, in my head, I wanted the people that I thought would be solely responsible for a whole game. Now I know that's completely not true.
Right.
But having started the book looking at mainly independence, I decided to simply focus on this person that was going to go and make the story, make the game.
Okay,
Thank
you.
I think we are out of time, and if you would like to talk to me more, I'll be in the wrap-up space. Please fill out the survey that they've sent you via the internet. I think that's all I'm supposed to say. Thank you very much.